Hey, it's Ben, and this is Learn Code by Gaming. Let's get started with this beginner AI project. It's time to install PyAutoGUI and take our first steps into botting. In this video, we're going to write our first simple bot, a timing bot. A timing bot takes a predetermined series of actions in a specific order and for a specific length of time. For example, we might press the W key for 5 seconds to move forward, and then we might press the D key for half a second to turn right, and then we might click on a specific spot on the screen and then wait 2 seconds for that menu to open, and so on. If you haven't installed Earth and Beyond yet, you'll want to go back to the first video in this series where I explain how to set up the game. Before we begin writing code, you're going to want to open up your favorite Python IDE, create a new project, and set up your virtual environment. Don't forget to also set up your Git repository if you'd like to use version control on this project. Now's a good time to pause the video and set all that up.
Okay, let's get started. I'm running Earth and Beyond at 1600 by 900, and I am on a 1080p monitor. So you'll want to have the same if you want to follow me exactly, or you're going to need to adjust the coordinates of your mouse locations to fit your own screen and setup. And inside the game, the first thing that we're going to want to do is create a new character, and we're going to create a Terran Tradesman. The Terran Tradesman is the best trader in the game, so it's perfect for this trading bot. And this way you'll start at the same location as me. We'll start at Loki Station on High Earth. Okay, and here we are at Loki Station. And now, in addition to having a game running in windowed mode, you'll need to have your editor open. I'm using VS Code, and I'm going to be running my scripts right from VS Code, and I also have my terminal located right in VS Code. One important thing to note is if you are running this in VS Code, or if you're going to be launching your scripts from a terminal, that program does need to be running in administrator mode. If it's not in administrator mode, the video game won't register your clicks. Okay, so I have created a project. I've got my virtual environment set up. I created a folder inside this project called Timing Bot, and I just created a main Python file. And I've got that open up here. And the first thing we'll need to do is install PyAutoGUI. So we'll do that from the terminal, and it's just a simple pip install PyAutoGUI. And if you're using Python 3 and your pip's not pointed to your Python 3 version of pip, you'll of course need to use pip 3. And that should be all it takes. I can pip list to make sure that it did install correctly. And yeah, I see PyAutoGUI installed on there. So now that we have PyAutoGUI installed, we can import it just simply by using import PyAutoGUI. And for this script, we'll also need to import time because we'll be using the sleep function to pause our script. Okay, and I'm beginning my script here with just a very basic main setup so that when we run it, it'll execute the code that's in main. And I've just copied that from another project. And before we do anything else, we're going to set up a failsafe for PyAutoGUI because, of course, when our bot starts controlling our mouse and our keyboard, there's the potential for it to get way off track. And in that case, we'll want to stop it so that it doesn't click the wrong things on our computer. PyAutoGUI comes with a failsafe for that, but you have to turn it on. And what it'll do is, when you have this failsafe enabled, you can just move your mouse to the upper left-hand corner of your screen, and when you do, your script will stop executing. So to do that, just type PyAutoGUI failsafe and set that equal to true. Okay, the first thing we need to think about with this bot is where is our starting location going to be? Because if we're always inputting the same commands every time we enter the station, we need to have a consistent starting point to begin from, or else it won't work correctly. So when you land at a station like this, there are actually several spots that you can begin at. I think there's 4 in total. So we can't use the spot where we land at when we first deboard our ship as our starting location. I've played around with several different starting locations. For a while I thought maybe starting here at the very back of this platform would be good. But not only do we need to start at the same spot, we also need to be oriented left and right in the same direction each time. And I found that trying to get a consistent location left and right was really difficult. So this is the solution I came up with. On this platform at this station, there's this Loudon McEwen character. And what I figured out is when you talk to one of these characters, your character automatically turns to face them. So that helps us get our left-right orientation. So the starting location that we should use is I want you to follow this wall here and just go until your character can't go anymore. And that'll set kind of our XY coordinates on the ground where our character will be located. Then turn slightly towards McEwen here and then go ahead and start a conversation with him. And as you can see, our character's shoulders turn a little bit, and that'll give us our consistent beginning location. It'll be right here on this platform. Now when we're switching back and forth between the script and the game, when our script starts executing, we'll need to have the game window selected. So we'll need to give ourselves a little bit of time, something like 10 seconds, so that we can first execute our script. And then quickly switch back to the game window before it starts running. So the first step here, after setting the PyAutoGUI failsafe. Okay, so we've initialized PyAutoGUI. Next thing we're going to want to do is create our countdown timer. And for that, I'm going to print it out to the console, our countdown. So starting. Well, I think I'd like to draw some dots, like 1 a second. So for I in range 0 to 10. Let's print out a dot, let's say. And so I'd like to print this all on one line. So you can set the end here to just be an empty string, and that way each print statement will begin on a new line. And then we'll want to sleep for 1 second between each dot. Sleep for 1 second. And then when we're done counting down, we'll print out go. And that'll indicate that our script is starting. So now that we've got our countdown timer set up, the first thing we should do is just try to do anything in the game to make sure that it is registering our inputs. So let's do anything. And let's just try to like turn around in a circle. So that'll be like the D key to turn right. So PyAutoGUI has a function called key down. So this is equivalent to pushing down on a key on the keyboard. And all you do is pass in what key you want it to press. So in our case, it'll be D. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to pause for a second while we have the key held down. And then after that second, we'll want to lift up on the key. So that'll just be the key up function. So let's sleep first. Say for 1 second again. PyAutoGUI will be key up. And now we can lift up on the D key. And then that will be the conclusion of our script. I'll print out something that says that we're done. And that'll go to our terminal. All right. So now I'll press play on the script. This will run it. And we get our little countdown timer. And before that finishes, we'll want to select our Earth and Beyond window. And then hands off the keyboard and mouse, and see what happens. And there we go. Our character turned right for 1 second. So if you tried that and nothing happened, remember again, you do need to run in administrator mode. You also need to make sure that you have the window selected properly. So let's return our character to the starting position. So now that we're in our starting position and we know how to control the keyboard in the game, the question becomes, how are we going to get our character over to the vendor that we want to buy some goods from? So I experimented with several different techniques. The one that I found that was most consistent was actually to begin by backing away from Loudon McEwen here. And so as we back away, we're just holding down the S key, and we will eventually return to the back of the room here. And then this is a pretty consistent action, and then we turn left slightly so that we're facing the doorway. So that'll be an A key. And then once we're there, we can just hit W to go forward. And you can see sometimes we bump against Loudon there, but I still found that this was kind of a consistent sort of bump that we could rely on. So we're going to go forward here until we're in the middle of the room. Then we're going to turn to the right until we're facing into the vendor area. Then we're going to go through those two doors. So now we're here in the bazaar in the center of that room. I'm going to turn right. And I'm going to have the character aim for this little crevice between these two merchants because we ultimately want to talk to this Eddie Duchamp character. So I'm going to go forward. And you'll see our character kind of slides into that slot there where it gets kind of stuck. That's a really good thing for us because it'll make sure we always end up at sort of the same location. And then from here, we'll click on the character and we'll initiate a trade. And we're going to buy a bunch of these manufacturing robots. Then once our character has done that, I'm going to have it rotate again, back up into the center of the room, turn right, go back through these doorways until we get to the center of this next room. I did some manual adjustments there, but of course our bot will follow a straight path. Turn left back out to the parking garage, go straight into it, and then from here we'll be able to get back on our ship and exit the starbase. So that's our goal. So how are we going to do that? So let's return to our starting position. And then we got to figure out how long do we need to hold down the S key. So you could pull out your phone here or a stopwatch or just count to yourself and kind of estimate how long does this take. I don't know, that felt like 5 seconds to me or so. So in our code, let's say we're going to move backwards. And we're going to hold the S key. We're going to do that for 5 seconds, and then we're going to lift it up. Let's see if we end up in that location that we expect. Okay, I'm running the script, making sure that the Earth and Beyond window has focus again. Hands off the mouse and keyboard. And it looks like 5 seconds was a little short, so we'll adjust that. So I've played around with it a little bit, and I found that exactly 6 seconds is a good amount of time. So let's try that. Okay, that looked pretty good. So the next thing we want to do is press the A key to turn left, just for a fraction of a second there until we're facing that doorway. So we're going to face the entrance, PyAutoGUI, key down, and we're pressing down on the A key this time. Going to sleep for, let's call it half a second to start with. PyAutoGUI, key up. All right, and then once again, back to our starting position, and we'll try out the script. Okay, so we saw that half a second was way too long there. We need to do something shorter than that. Okay, and after a few adjustments, I found that 1/10 of a second worked pretty well. So let's see if this works. Well, I know it works, so I just tried it. Let's see if we get the same result again. Okay, that looks pretty good, pretty straight. Now I'm noticing in our code that we're doing writing these three lines of code over and over again. And I think it'd be pretty handy to have a function, just a simple function where we can just pass in what key we want to press and for how long, so that this isn't quite so tedious to type. So let's write this after the main function. We'll call it hold key. And we'll need to know what key it is we want to press, and then for how long. And let's give it a default of 1 second. And then we'll just write the code we did before. Key down, except this time our key down will be the key that's passed in. We're going to sleep for the seconds that we're giving in this function. And then we're going to lift up on the key. I also feel like we should maybe have a little bit of delay between each key press that we want to do. So I'm going to add that right here. Let's set it to 1 second maybe. Let's make this a constant so that we can easily adjust it later. Delay between commands, I'll call it. And then I like to define my constants at the top of my script. Set equal to 1 second for now. Okay, so now we can replace these segments of code with our new hold key function. So we'll hold key S for 6 seconds. Delete that. And then we're going to hold key A for 1/10 of a second. All right, that looks pretty good. I think I also want to create functions for this initialization code as well. So let's call this initialize PyAutoGUI. I'll write a function for that. But that will still just turn on the failsafe. And then this countdown timer, let's also create a function for that. Okay, and that organizes our code a little bit, cleans up our main function. And now we've got several more steps to do to walk our character over to the merchant. So from this position, we'll next walk forward holding W. And I hope you get the idea here. It is getting a little tedious and boring and repetitive for you. So I'll skip ahead and just give you the answers for this part of the bot. Okay, so we're going to back away for 6 seconds, turn left for 1/10 of a second, go forward for 7 seconds, turn to the right for 0.65 seconds, then go forward again for 5.6 seconds, turn to the trade merchant to the right 1.16 seconds, and then we'll walk up to the trade merchant for 1.5 seconds. So let's return to our starting position. And let's run this and see if we get all the way there. Okay, so we have successfully navigated all the way to the trading merchant. And on this vendor, the next thing we're going to want to do is click on it to initiate this trade to buy all these manufacturing robots. Okay, so from this position, the next step that we want to take is we want to click on the screen, click on Eddie to start a chat with him. And to do this, the first thing we're going to need to know is where on the screen are we holding our mouse. So let's write a function to figure that out. Let's call this report mouse position. Mouse position. And let's give it a seconds argument for how long we want to report the position for. Let's say the default's 10. And then PyAutoGUI has a function called position that will output the position for us. So let's go ahead and print that to the console. Let's do that once every second, let's say. Okay, so when we call this function, default argument 10 seconds, it's going to go through this loop once every second for up to 10 seconds. And each time it's going to print out the position to our terminal. Now, after we go through these steps is when we want to print out the position. Report mouse position. But of course, in the game, we're already at the merchant and we don't really want to run through all these steps again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move all of these commands to its own function. Let's call it go to merchant. Go to merchant is just going to execute these steps that we've already figured out. Will get us from the dock to the merchant that we want to sell to. And what moving this to its own function will allow us to do is that we can easily comment this out while we just want to execute a single portion of our code. So right now, all we want to do is get the mouse position. So let's run our code. Select the game window and then hover your mouse right over where you want to click. And then once the script runs, we should start outputting this to the terminal. So we can see that this is X 1243 and the Y position is 391. So that's where we're going to want to click on the screen to start talking to this vendor. And let's think ahead of here a little bit. At some point after we write this code to talk to the merchant and buy the goods we want to buy, we might want to also disable that in the future. So let's make a function for it right away. Call this buy or trade because we're going to sell in the future too. Trade with merchant. Then write that function. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is click on this position 1243 by 391. And PyAutoGUI has a function for moving the mouse. It is just called move to. And then you give it the X and the Y coordinates. And then you can set a duration too for how long you want it to take the mouse to get to that location. So let's set that, we'll say a quarter second. And then after we move the mouse, let's take a quick pause. So time.sleep, and we'll use our constant from before. There's delay between commands. And then to do the click, PyAutoGUI has a function for that. I believe it's just click. And let's go ahead and run this and see if it's working. Okay, so you saw our mouse move to the right location, and then it clicked on this merchant. The next step is going to be to move the mouse to this trade button and click on that. So you will have noticed it took a little bit of time after we clicked on the merchant for those windows to pop up. So let's account for that time. So wait for dialog to appear. Let's wait for 3 seconds, how about? And then once that happens, we want to click on that trade button. So I went ahead and figured out where that position was using the report mouse position function we wrote. And instead of doing a separate move to and click function calls here, you can actually just call click and pass in the X, Y coordinates and also the duration for the mouse movement. So let's do that instead here. So it'll be PyAutoGUI, click. The X is 378 and the Y was 799. And then the duration we want to take, let's do a quarter second again. Now let's run this. Okay, so we clicked on the merchant, started this, waited, clicked on the trade button. All right, now we're ready to trade. And so the next thing we're going to want to do is buy a bunch of these manufactured robots. So the way you do that in the game, you could select the robot and click buy. You can also just hold shift while you left click on one of these trade items and it'll automatically enter your inventory. And that's a little bit faster, so we'll use that method right here. So I went ahead and finished out this section of code because I think you were kind of getting the idea here. I will say that sometimes I was having trouble using just the click function call with the X and Y coordinates. For instance, on this step, when I tried to combine it to click the item that I want to buy. So I went ahead and separated the mouse movement and the mouse click with a second in between them. And for buying the item, we eventually want to fill up our entire inventory, but we don't want to do that when we're testing. So I created this num to buy variable. I'm going to set it to 1 for now, but when we finalize our script, it'll be, I think 32 is our maximum capacity. Okay, it's actually 28 is the maximum capacity. And using key down to hit the left shift button. And then while holding shift, I'm clicking on that item to buy 28 times, or in this case, 1 time. And then when I'm done doing that, I lift up on the shift key. And I should note here this shift left string, like how do we know that means the left shift button? That's from the documentation. So here's the link to the documentation. Let's take a quick look at that. So here is the documentation. I went to the keyboard control functions, and then at the very bottom of that page under keyboard keys, it lists out all of the different strings that we can use that match up with different keys on your keyboard. And in here, you'll see the shift left key. Okay, and once we've purchased all of our items, the final steps are to click the close button and then click the done button. So let's run this and see if it works. All right, so here's an instance where it didn't do what we expect. I'm going to hold my mouse in the upper left-hand corner and wait for it to exit my script. Okay, it exited with code 1. Okay, so I got this error, name sleep is not defined. And that was because I was writing it out those sleep function calls like this. But of course, that's a property of time, so I need to do time.sleep. I could have left sleep like this if I wanted to. And I would have imported that like from time import sleep. And that's really your preference. This second method would be fine for this script because we're not using any other functions from time. So I'll go ahead and update the code to use just this base sleep. Okay, now let's run our trade with merchant code to see if it's working. All right, we're talking to Eddie, going to trade, buying 1 manufacturing robot, then closing and clicking done. Perfect. So the next step here is to exit this room and go get back on our ship. So we've gone to the merchant, we've traded with the merchant, now let's return to ship. So the code here is going to be really similar to what we wrote for going to the merchant, just slightly in reverse. First, we're going to change our body angle a little bit so that we can back up into the center of that room. Then we can turn towards the exit, walk through the exit. Once we're in the center of that main lobby room, we can turn back towards the hangar, go out through to the hangar, turn towards the ship, and then click on the ship to exit the station. And then after we do exit the station on our ship, it takes a few seconds for the outside world to load. So we're going to sleep for 10 seconds to wait for that to happen. And when I run this code, I'm going to run all portions of it just to make sure that everything's working together well. So in the game, I'll return to our initial starting position. All right, and let's give it a go. And you see there we're a little off the mark, but because we're trying to slide into that location where we get stuck, it helps to correct us a little bit. There we're just buying one manufacturing robot. And now we're off here because we didn't pause at all after buying those robots. So I'm going to move my mouse up to the upper left, hold it there for a few seconds to make sure our script will exit. Okay, it's exited. Run my character around to reset it. Let's go back to our starting position and then fix our code. Okay, so it was in between trading with a merchant and returning to our ship. We needed maybe more of a pause there, or maybe it just failed to turn towards the center of the room. Okay, yeah, so you'll notice when you click the done button, there's kind of a zoom out animation. We need to wait for that to finish before we can start inputting new commands. So I've just added this 2-second sleep here that should correct the error that we saw. So let's try it again. All right, looking good so far. And this time my code is set to buy all 28 robots, but because this is a new character, I don't have enough credits to buy all those robots. So it's failing to buy these, but that's fine. The code should still continue to run without any issue. All right, looks like we waited for that animation correctly now, and we're exited out of the station. Awesome. Click on our ship and let's leave the station. Okay, so the final step in this part of the tutorial series is I want to fly to the next station we're going to sell these goods. So to do that, we'll open our navigation map, and over here there's a gate. We need to discover it first. So let's go fly over there. Click the warp button in the middle here. Then we can enjoy these sweet flying in space animations. And there on the left you can see the gate that we were looking for, the sector gate to Earth. We can warp over to that. Then you enter these gates by clicking this button. Okay, and now we're in Earth, and this is Earth Station, which is where we're going to sell our robots. but we want to automate all of these flying through space parts too. So let's go back to Loki Station and write the code to do all this for us. Alright, so we are back just outside of Loki Station. Let's go back to our code. And again, I'm going to disable these other 3 steps of our bot. And this one we'll call fly to Earth Station. So the first thing we're going to want to do is open up this navigation map, and then we're going to want to select this sector gate to Earth. So let's do those 2 parts first. Okay, so I used our report mouse position function again to get these coordinates on the screen. This is the coordinates of the navigation map. We're going to go click that, and then after that we're going to click on the sector gate to Earth. So let's make sure this is working. And it didn't quite click it. So let me adjust it a little bit. I got 469 here. We'll try again. Make sure we're back in our starting situation. Okay, I got it that time. And you'll notice it takes a second or 2 for it to calculate that path. We want to make sure we wait for that to happen before we initiate our warp. And we could initiate our warp by clicking the warp button here in the middle of the screen. But there's also a hotkey for it. It's the Z button. We'll do a warp as well. So let's go ahead and use that hotkey. It'll be a little easier. Okay, so in our code, I'm waiting a 1.5 seconds for the warp path to be calculated, and then to start the warp I'm going to press the C key. Let's see if this works. Okay, that worked well. And at this point what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to wait for however long it takes us to fly from the station to the gate. Okay, so I watched that and I think it took about 30 seconds to get there, so let's try 30 seconds for a wait time to get to this gate. So in the code here, I'm going to wait 30 seconds for that warp to finish. And then once we get there, I'm going to click on the enter gate icon. And once I do that, it's going to change the sector and it throws up that loading screen. We need to wait for that too. I'm estimating that's going to take about 15 seconds. That is a variable number, so you'll want to play around with that, make sure it works all the time. Okay, so we're back in our starting position. Let's run it and see if we make our way over to Earth. And of course, when you're testing your script here, you'll want to be careful not to drag around on this map yourself, or it'll mess up the mouse positions of all your code. It's okay to move the mouse around though, when it's not moving the mouse, because of course, wherever your mouse happens to be sitting at, it's going to move from there to the XY position that we want to click. Okay, so that didn't take too long. The final part here is just to go to Earth Station and click this button to dock at it. Okay, so I've finished writing that code, and I've decided to open up the navigation map, and from there select Earth Station. Because you'll notice I do have the option of just clicking on the middle of the screen to select it, but there's the possibility that another player could be in front of me and I accidentally select the player instead. So I feel like it's a more consistent option to open up the map and then select Earth Station on it. After I've selected Earth Station, I'm going to go ahead and do the warp, wait for it to finish, and then click on the button to dock at the station. So let's run this and see if it works. Well, of course, that's not going to work because I'm not at our starting location. I'm at the starting location just inside of this Earth sector. So I've got two options. I can either go back to Loki Station and our initial starting spot, or I could test this code by commenting out that part of the Fly to Earth Station section. Let's give that a try. So I'm going to do a block comment. And right there is where we want to start testing out our code. Okay, we're flying to Earth Station. We just need to wait and then dock at it. And then once you arrive at Earth Station, let's go ahead and manually sell our trade goods to get our credits back up so that we can continue testing our code back at Loki Station. So I believe it is this Lenorn Lister guy we need to trade with. And then we're going to sell all of our manufacturing robots. Again, you can just shift click on them. You can see we got our credits back up. And on this portion of the trade route, what we're going to buy are these anti-rads. So I can buy a few of those and head back to Loki Station with them. Okay, so back at Loki Station, before we do a final test run through of our entire code, you're going to want to go and sell those anti-rads if you pick them up. If you don't, you just won't be able to purchase your full load of manufacturing robots. So with those sold, let's go back and talk to McEwen. Remember to follow along with this wall to get back to the proper starting location. And then in our code, make sure to remove that comment block. And then in our main function, let's enable all the steps in our timing bot. And we don't need to report the mouse position anymore because we're pretty sure that we've got it. And that should be all there is to it. Let's run it and see if it works. Okay, that was step 1 complete. We're back to this mini reset spot. It looks like we're trading all right with Eddie here. We've got a few more credits this time, so we can buy a few more robots. But of course, we still don't have enough credits for a full trade run. And you'll notice when you run this multiple times, no two runs are exactly the same. Sometimes it takes those doors longer to open than others. So we're just aiming for something that works most of the time. Something that's 90% functional at this point should be what you expect. These timing bots, they're just real fragile like that. One little thing takes longer to load than usual, and it just throws off your entire script. But we'll talk about ways to correct for that with the future videos in this series. Okay, it looks like it took a little longer than usual to do that warp. So let's stop our script, holding my mouse in the upper left here. I was in the Fly to Earth Station portion. I don't think we waited long enough for our warp to finish. And it's okay if we overshoot here, so let's just make it quite a bit longer, an extra 6 seconds to it. And of course, we'll need to manually fly back to Loki Station and back to our initial starting location. Alright, I'm back at the initial starting location. Let's try it again. Okay, we're looking alright so far. Of course, we won't be able to buy any of these robots because we're out of credits. Alright, it's running pretty straight this time. Shouldn't have any trouble getting out of the station. No problem there with the warp. It looks like we waited long enough that time to arrive at the gate, and we clicked on the gate successfully. Looks like we've waited long enough here, and we've almost done it. We just need to get to Earth Station and then dock it. And success! So we've successfully automated a full half of this trading run. Hopefully that was pretty easy for you to understand and follow along. If you missed any of the code, I'll have a link to the GitHub repository in the description.
Okay, great job at completing phase 1 of this series. We've already learned some powerful tools for botting in this video, and hopefully your head is spinning with other ways that you could apply these techniques. If you'd like more practice, a good exercise would be to use the same techniques I've shown you here to automate selling to the next vendor at Earth Station. You'll want to have your characters sell your manufacturing robots to the vendor there, and then buy a full stack of alpha rads, then head back to your ship and fly back to Loki Station. Now I see a few of you hesitating, and I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to skip this exercise. I'm sure you've noticed by now that setting up a bot like this is really tedious, and it's taken us a while just to get to this point. But there is a solution for this. In the next video, I'm going to show you how you can record your actions inside the game and run them again later. This will greatly speed up the process of creating new timing bot scripts. So thanks for watching, and when you're ready, I'll see you in the next video.